everybody. So our talk is going to be on beautiful, canonical, and responsive AMP pages. My name is La. I'm a front-end developer at UpperQuad, and this is Eric.
Yeah, my name's Eric. I'm a product manager on AMP. And after La talks about her team's experience redesigning the new AMP project website, I'm going to talk about some new and upcoming features in AMP.
Yep. So this talk is going to be split up into two parts. So my half of the talk is going to be about my team at UpperQuad's experience redesigning and developing the new ampproject.org. And we'll talk about some challenges we faced and how we got over those. So some background on us. We are a creative digital studio in San Francisco. And what that means is that we take on a lot of client work. We do design and development, and it's usually a lot of tech companies or other types of companies looking for really creative, fun web experiences and good design. So this is the kind of some pictures of our office space and people that work there. And then I'll show you some of the projects that we do to give you an idea of like our background and what we usually work on. So this is one project that we end up doing every year around Christmas time. It's the Google Santa Tracker. And it's like a digital advent calendar where every day we unlock a new game or interactive scene or fun cartoon about what Santa's been up to throughout the year. And it all culminates on the actual Santa Tracker on December 24th, which shows Santa's location on a map as he's dropping off presents. This is a website we did for a Git conference, Git Merge. And you can see there's like these line animations and stuff as you scroll down the page to like kind of guide you throughout the page. This is like super fresh, hot, off the presses release that we released yesterday. It's in partnership with Patagonia, and it's to promote the Bears Ears National Monument in southeastern Utah. And it involves a lot of rich media experiences. There's 360 video, storytelling from locals of Bears Ears, these flyovers from Google Earth, just to really get you like background on what the natural features are of that area and to help protect it. So that's to kind of give you an idea of what we usually work on. As you can see, it's like stuff that's really pushing the boundaries of web development and what you can do on the web. And so when we got this project from the AMP team last year, it was a little bit of a departure from what we're used to. And so I'm going to go over like some of the growing pains of that. But first, I'll take you on a walkthrough through the site that was recently launched, just to get everyone kind of familiar. So this is the new homepage. There's like some fun animations, carousel, information about AMP. And then for the developers, we have all of the same documentation pages and guides that used to be there, but a little more organized. And so this is desktop and fully responsive for mobile. So this is what one of the pages looks like on mobile. And so back to the presentation. So this site is fully built with AMP. It's a little bit of a different use case than what we were familiar with for AMP. We thought that AMP was mostly like a content delivery format, that you have a version of your site in AMP and then your regular version, but here we're actually doing the entire website with AMP. And so some interesting challenges there combined with this being our first time using AMP at UpperQuad. There is no custom JavaScript allowed, and we super rely on JavaScript usually on our websites because we add like these huge features and little tiny details that need it. So we really had to change the way that we thought about what we can design and develop. Luckily, although there's no custom JavaScript, we have AMP components to work with, so we had to learn about what those were, what they can do. They didn't really cover everything that our designers thought up for the site, so we had to figure out like ways to get around that and compromise. There's the CSS size limit, which is not something that we usually think about as much as we should. So we hit the limit pretty quickly, so this is something we had to keep in mind throughout the entire process of developing the website. The people probably most hard hit by these limitations on our team were our designers. They never really had to design under these constraints before, so they needed to figure out like what kind of stuff we can do without JavaScript and what we couldn't. They had to learn about the AMP components and try to design to those specifications. So really, for this project, both design and development had to work together from the very beginning so that there was nothing miscommunicated. And the last thing we wanted to do was just say, oh, it's AMP, like, let's just take the easy route and make a totally static website. We wanted to still put as many interactive details in the website as possible. So the rest of this talk will be about how we overcame these challenges, and I'll start by kind of how we as a development team worked with the design team. Basically, we tried to explain to them a general rule of thumb for what we would need JavaScript for. Anything that keeps track of the state of the page or any like complicated logic would probably have to be cut out. This came up a lot, scroll-triggered events on the page. We weren't able to do any of those without JavaScript, and I'll go over some examples of the stuff we had to cut out in the next slide. And as developers at Upper Quad, we really try hard to make our designers' dreams a reality. So if something was really important to the design, if they came to us and they weren't sure if it was possible, we would try really hard to figure out maybe some sort of workaround to get it to work. So here's some of the scroll-triggered actions that we had to throw out of the site. They had the idea of having content fade in on scroll, like fade in and come up and be cool, but we couldn't do that. Anything with the header changing, like changing size or changing the box shadow, we didn't end up doing. And any like buttons that take you to other parts of the page, smooth scrolling, we did not do any of those. But there are a lot of things we were able to do. This section will be some of the things that we were able to do that we had to tweak a little bit from the original design, but still ended up working out. So this is a mock-up of the new case studies list page. The AMP team told us that there were probably going to be a lot more case studies. Right now there's maybe like 8 or 9. And so they wanted different categories for the case studies to be bucketed into, so it's easier to find what you're interested in. So we came up with this design that has filters across the top of the page. And in an ideal world, there would have been like some fun animation rearranging of these cards on the page when you select one of the categories, but that's obviously not really possible without JavaScript. So what we ended up doing is more of a static approach where we just change those filters into regular links that link out to a page for that specific category. And so the functionality is still there, just a little bit of the fun animations we had to cut out. This is a mock-up of the new docs, one of the new docs pages. This is a guide. And we designed this left nav for the docs page, which shows you all of the other pages that are sort of related in the same bucket. And the original idea was to also have kind of the table of contents of the current page in that docs page, and then as you scroll down, the headings would highlight to let you know what section you're currently on. And as I mentioned, we couldn't really do anything on scroll, so we skipped this feature. Another feature for this navigation, this left nav, was having these expanding collapsing sections so that on the page you could explore like what the other pages are in like the author developed guide section for this example. So at first we thought, oh, like we can just use an AMP accordion for that. We can expand and collapse the sections. Unfortunately, the headings also have to be links to the actual pages they're linking out to, and there is no way currently to have those links also control an AMP accordion. So what we ended up doing is going for a more static approach again. And so each page is the link, but then the state of the accordion, it depends on which page you're on. So if you're inside of a section, it'll expand it. And then when you leave that section, it'll collapse it. And so it still gives you an impression of there being an accordion kind of functionality, but it's actually just static. And then some stuff we were able to do without even really tweaking the original design. So we had a lot of fun, creative uses of AMP components that we did that are kind of like not what they're specifically advertised for. So we use AMP accordion in a couple different ways. Right here, this is a share button, expanding share button. So we have it animating out the different social media platforms. And all of that is controlled by an AMP accordion, and the state of it we're just like referencing in CSS and using CSS transitions. Similarly, the language selector is also controlled using an AMP accordion. So you can see that that little toggle logic that you would usually write a tiny bit of JavaScript for, you can reuse AMP accordion to do that in a few different weird ways. We had designed on our site a 3-up carousel with 3 cards. Originally, we wanted it to be able to advance like 1 card at a time, but that wasn't really possible yet. So instead, we did this thing where each slide of the AMP carousel has 3 cards on it, so it looks like a 3-card carousel, but yeah. The mobile menu is pretty interesting. So if you look at the desktop nav, there can be up to like 3 layers of menus. And we wanted to find a way to show that on mobile without just showing like a huge list. So what we ended up coming up with was this menu where each sub-menu will slide over on top. And so this is sort of a funny thing that we did where each option with the sub-menu is secretly has a checkbox in it. So then when you check that checkbox, we know which sub-menu to show. And a consequence of that is that there is a back button on the menu, but it's actually just kind of a fake out back button because if you click anywhere on that menu, it'll unselect the checkbox and go back. And then a really easy way to make a site look good is just add a lot of like little visual polish things. So one of the things we did was create these phone renders where we could throw on like examples of all of the sites out there using AMP, and then we place them all throughout the page. And you really feel like AMP is really cool, like look all the places that it's being used. We added a bunch of fun little hover states everywhere just to make it feel more interactive, more engaging, and we can do all of this with CSS. We added these really cool line animations. It's all using CSS keyframe animations and transforms. And so this is just like, whoa, look how fast AMP is. This added a lot of CSS to our page CSS, but we thought it was worth it because it was fun. And we only use it on 1 page currently, so. Yeah, so talking about CSS, the most important thing that we did to keep down our CSS size was splitting up the CSS for each page. So the home page gets its own set of the CSS, the case studies, et cetera, get their own set. We were also using SCSS, and that, for us at least, kind of encourages you to come out with a lot big CSS files. And so there are little things you can do when you're just at that 50K limit to push it down, like consolidating your media queries, which are pretty long, so any that are the same, just have it once. You know, like make your class name shorter, don't nest too much, stuff like that. But the most important thing was splitting up the CSS. So what are some lessons that we learned while working on this site? You can do a surprising amount of stuff without JavaScript, and the site will still look good and function pretty well. We can reuse AMP component logic that's built in pretty interesting ways since they're so customizable. And really just get both the development and design team talking early on in the process so that we don't promise anything that we can't do and that everybody knows like how to design for AMP. Okay, so Eric can come up now and tell you some new features that might help people in the future.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned before, my name's Eric. I'm a product manager on AMP, and I work on AMP format, which essentially means that I and the other folks working on the team work to support new functionality in AMP, but also work to support engaging and delightful features in AMP that users like and enjoy. So that includes some of the features on this list that I'm going to talk about. But also includes some important tweaks, fixing the little things that add up to a good experience for users and developers, because that's the sort of entire ecosystem that we're working with. So one thing that La mentioned was AMP accordion, the problem where the header can't also function as a link at the same time. That's a small thing that we just want to make work. You can do little hacks to make that work, and you've seen that in the wild a little bit, but we want to make that work a little bit easier and a little bit more nicely. Smooth scrolling, the mechanic where you tap on a link on the page and it smoothly scrolls with a nice animation curve to something else on the same page. We also want to get that to work well. And then finally, filters. This is something we've been thinking about a lot, in part because you see this use case all over the web, but it's particularly key in e-commerce in a number of cases to take a lot of information and give the tools for the user to make that digestible and make it easy to make a selection. So on to some of the meatier things that we've been thinking about. The first is AMP bind. And I'm super, super excited about this. This is something we've been working on for a while. If you've been looking at the repo, if you've been looking at some of the stuff we've been talking about, you might know about this already. It's essentially a layer in AMP, a coding layer that enables more rich interactivity. And you're going to hear a lot more about this from Will, the developer who worked on this, later today in his talk. I think it's called Turing Complete AMP Pages. So hopefully that's exciting. I definitely recommend you check it out. But in short, it's essentially gives AMP a notion of different document states that correlate to attributes, classes, and content for different elements on the page. Content for text, for instance. And then it also adds a layer for triggers with user interaction. Triggers might be a user tapping on a button or advancing the carousel, something user-initiated that we can then determine, and the developer can determine this constitutes an intent to change the state. So when the user does that, the state gets updated. And you can see a little example here where the user clicks on these thumbnails, indicating which color of apple they're selecting, and the carousel updates to show a customized slideshow of just that color apple. You may or may not be able to tell too, but you can see that the size options for each apple are limited depending on the color. You can make these things conditional. You'll also notice that swiping through, the selected slide changes. So it gives all these components, all these elements, a way to talk to one another and update state in a coherent way. And it's very flexible. You might even create a multi-stage menu on mobile, like La's team wanted to do. They were able to do this eventually and work through this sort of checkbox notion. But bind should give you a way to do that a little more semantically and easily. But bind isn't it is not unlimited. We want to stay true to the core principles of AMP. We want it to be a good UX across the board and also have really good performance. And so we're gradually whitelisting the types of state features that are exposed to users to be able to change, in addition to the types of triggers that can be used to change those things. Definitely encourage you to check out Will's talk, and also check this out and give us feedback for what your types of use cases are and your experience developing. It's currently experimental, which means that you can opt into the experiment, but it won't validate an AMP. So you can't use it in your production pages yet. We really, really want to nail this, and it depends on your feedback to do that. In contrast to this sort of more general interaction framework, you're probably already familiar with the way that components enable specific use cases in AMP. Some early examples of this in AMP are the Lightbox and Carousel. These, of course, are web staples. They're important to getting engaging imagery on the web. We launched them fairly early, but we got feedback that while these were great, they were essential even for static pages, they didn't offer everything that people needed to really get the experience they wanted. So we've been working on better ways not only to improve the carousel itself, this sort of image carousel that you swipe through to see images, and not only the Lightbox, which you can sort of tap and get a more immersive view, but also the way these two things fit together and work together. So I'm going to switch into the demo here. This is a live demo, so we'll see how graceful this is. But essentially, you can see the carousel here, more or less what you expect, swipeable carousel, and the recently released go-to-slide method, which also links these thumbnail clicks with the carousel so it advances to a particular slide. Those are in production. You can use those as is right now. Some experimental features like AMP Bind. For instance, I'm also going to go through here. For instance, you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner a better affordance for understanding which number of the slides in the carousel you're on. Right now, we're here on slide 4 of 8. And that changes as you tap and swipe and go through these guys. Let's see, and you can also, let's see, so it was possible before to tap into a carousel and duplicate the code on the page. So you had a carousel on the top level page, and then you had a sort of, the user didn't know there were different carousels, but you had another in the Lightbox. It duplicated code, it meant more code on the page. It was kind of a hassle. What we want to do now, and what this is essentially enabling the same experience, but making it a bit easier. The more generalized Lightbox, you wrap it around the carousel, it knows what's in there, and then you get this whole experience for free. And then it means we can also do some special things, like introduce this gallery view, where you can quickly jump to other items in the carousel and gives the user sort of like more of a bird's eye view of all the different things in there. That's it for this interaction. So we can go back to the slides. But essentially, let's see. Yeah, there's the demo. So speaking of interactions that sort of make imagery richer and make the experience a little more delightful in AMP, we also worked on another feature. Let's see. Here we go. Got a little lost in the slides there. Yes. Let's talk about parallax scrolling. So yeah, we can jump into the other demo, actually. So you might already be familiar with parallax scrolling. It's typically these sort of subtle effects that you see as I scroll up. The title for the page scrolls a little bit faster than the image. And if I go a little bit further down, you see that this image, and maybe this is a little bit more subtle, scrolls a little bit faster than the viewport when I'm scrolling up and down. These are just little touches that are ideally delightful, engaging for the user, but not distracting. They add sort of a layer on top where people can associate this sort of interest with your brand and have a good experience while they're on the page. But you could also imagine using using this in a whole bunch of different ways. You have enough control to even create layered different speeds to create an entire 3D scene. So we're excited about that. That'll be another fun one to try out. It's also experimental. We have a demo running now, but again, this is another one that we'll be looking to try out and get feedback on. All right, so back into the slides. Another thing we want to do, speaking of scroll-dependent interactions, is we're working on a way to have scroll-bound CSS. Now, you remember that La mentioned that her team wanted to fade content in on scroll. We want to make that possible, and the idea is that we're going to try to make this feature possible with narrow use cases, and then open it up to a more general framework. So fading in content on scroll, also as demonstrated with the just AMP header here, the AMP viewer header, the ability to scroll the header out and scroll it back in dependent on, roughly on user intent, scrolling up or scrolling down, to take more advantage of the space of the screen on the mobile phone and give users a better ability to focus on the content that I want to. But eventually, when we open up the general framework, we also want to give broad ability to do interesting things as well. Les team mentioned wanted to highlight elements of, say, a sidebar menu as you scroll down the screen to continue to give the user context as they navigate the page. We want to make that work. And then we also broadly and more abstractly, in order to enable use cases that we can't necessarily predict right now, trigger class changes, element animations, things like that on the screen to better enable developers to engage users. So the last thing I want to mention is AMP Start, and that's another big one. We launched this, we're announcing the launch of this today. And let's see, I think I went a little bit too far here. There we go. It's essentially a set of quick start code templates to create interesting, good-looking pages right off the bat. That means less research for developers to learn exactly how to compose their own AMP pages, less time sort of grappling with CSS to get a good look off the bat that then you can then customize, put in your own content, and get your own brand looking good in AMP. So it provides kind of a baseline. It's a set of templates, components, and then sort of a CSS framework that we built on to do these things. And here's a little bit of a video preview. So if you go to the site, it's ampstart.com. You can check out the templates in context, view it on different devices, mobile, tablet, and desktop. And there are recommended articles, onward journeys like in the menu, all work out of the box. If you like what you see, you can download the code, which has the full template and separate CSS sort of maximized version for you to tweak. There's also a set of components that you can go through, check them out, how they work with the baseline style, and also get the HTML for them once you've checked them out. And when you copy and paste that, it should inherit the general style of the page, so it's in keeping with the style of the template that you started with. And here's an example of something that we built that's up on the site that you can check out too. This is an example of sort of a more opinionated type site that you can get. Notice that it looks totally different than the other templates, but has sort of a lot of the basic affordances in there that are common on the mobile web. So as with all of these things, ultimately the project depends on your feedback. It depends on your engagement, on telling us what works and what doesn't, checking out AMP Start, submitting design ideas, submitting code and templates. It's open source like the AMP project itself. So yeah, we really want to hear from you, know what your needs are so we can respond to those and make AMP better.
Yeah, and all of the the code for the new AMP site is also up on GitHub, and if you have any questions or feedback for me, just come find me after the talk.
Yeah, definitely. Find both of us. We want to chat. Cool. Thanks. That's it.